cloud. Okay, very good. So I want to welcome Tobey Oxholm to our Public Safety and Criminal Justice Committee meeting here on what is it, Wednesday, March 9th. And so Tobey has generously agreed to come and explain more about the Pardon Project, which we're excited to bring to Lebanon County. And we know it's a long and sort of complex process. So we're just going to turn it over to you, Tony, and the floor is yours. And I'll be letting people into the room as the evening goes on. But please go ahead. Welcome to Lebanon County.
Well, thank you very much. And if you wouldn't mind, since I prepared a PowerPoint, I'll begin to show it. Is that all right with you, Mike?
Perfect.
So let me begin by saying that if there are questions, you can either put them in the chat and then Mike can ask them, or you can unmute yourself and blurt them out. I probably will cover most of the stuff, but it's best that we keep up with each other so that I'm not talking too fast, which I grew up being a Philadelphia lawyer and I really know how to talk fast because this is what we do in Philadelphia. So if I get in front of you, you got to let me know. You just say, whoa, slow down. Otherwise, I'll keep talking really fast. So you know what I'm saying? Okay. Anyway, I'm really glad to be invited to talk with you about what's going on around the state. This really is an amazing opportunity and nobody knows about it. So I want to begin with a couple key terms so that we all are on the same page for what I'm saying and what you're hearing. A criminal record. Now, this may be too basic. Some of you may know it all because this is the Public Safety and Criminal Justice Committee. But a criminal record, you get one whenever you're arrested and charged. And if you are released and the DA decides not to prosecute or the judge tosses the charges because they were BS or you're found innocent, you still have a criminal record. It is permanent unless a judge expunges it, which is a lawyer word, Latin word for erase. So it's there until it's expunged. You probably heard about clean slate. Clean slate don't clean nothing. What it does is it puts a little top over it so you can't see it, but it's there. And the people who can see it all the time are the police and the prosecutors. So if you're at all worried or concerned about, I don't know, walking while black or driving while black or going to homes for sale that are, while you're black, clean slate doesn't do much for you. It also doesn't do anything for you if you're trying to get a job in home care, health care, child care, elder care, working for a contractor that does federal jobs, working for a contractor that uses the FBI background check, because it isn't secret from any of that stuff. So depending on who you are and what you're trying to do, your criminal record, clean slated, can come up and bite you when you least expect it, and then you can't do anything about it because it's too late. Commutation is a term that's used a lot, and it's fairly broad because it involves shortening your sentence. It can be commuting somebody who's serving a life sentence and letting them out. It can let them out for a lesser sentence. It can be on probation or parole. It is shortening your sentence. A pardon doesn't do that. A pardon forgives the person for the crime. It blots the crime out as if it didn't occur and you were innocent all along. Clemency means pardons and commutations, right? So that's the broader term. An exoneration means, I wasn't ever guilty and now I've proved it. I've been exonerated. We're not talking about that. Pardons begin on the premise that you were found guilty. And just like going to church, when you go into the confessional and you say, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned, you have to say the I've sinned part in order to be forgiven, right? Because you don't go into the confessional and say, forgive me, Father, because I got hosed, right? It was my fault. I didn't do it. That's not going to get you the pardon in a religious term. And it's really hard to get a pardon in the civil setting as well. So tonight, in the 20 minutes I may be talking to you, I'm going to go through this outline, which is like what Mike told me I had to talk about. What's a pardon project? What's the problem? What's the opportunity? And what's the next steps if you're interested in having one? So a pardon project is really neighbors helping neighbors, right? And we here in Philadelphia think of this as being in the tradition of the late Reverend Leon Sullivan, who believed that you can't look to the government to solve your problems. It was low-income communities, communities of color that decided to invest in themselves build their own, buy their own, grow their own, and really protect their own. It's neighbors helping neighbors. And that's the strength of a pardon project, because we're using a system that already exists, but we're relying on neighbors to help people get through it. And so pardon projects, they're community-based efforts. They're connecting people with criminal records to organizations and people who've been trained in how to help them. And the organizations we're calling pardon hubs because they draw people, they have resources, they have information, people from the neighborhood come to them, learn, and they can actually meet individuals who've been trained, pardon coaches, who can help them actually fill out the application and get on their way to a pardon. So those are the key words we're talking about. Now, who participates in a pardon project is like everybody. There's nobody who's excluded from this stuff. I put district attorneys in it because you're going to see where they have important inputs into the pardon process. Public defenders can, but usually they're dealing with people who are currently being prosecuted. And pardons are only for people who have finished their sentences. So public defenders and pardon projects are more trying to get the word out to people who were their clients 5, 10, 15 years ago. Judges, pathonetaries, clerks, healthcare, community action agencies, community development corporations, Rotaries, the Knights of Columbus, the Elks, colleges, universities, workforce, anybody can help. And communities of faith, obviously. And there are two different ways they're helping. One is getting the word out to people who need to know. Another is training people who become the helpers, the pardon coaches. They can be both. They can do just one or the other. But for a pardon project to work, you need to have both. Outreach to the communities and individuals who have the worst, have been most heavily impacted, and people who are willing to help them. And there is now an association statewide of these pardon projects that we've been building over the past year. They're popping up all around the state. And the question for you guys is, do you want to try to bring one to Lebanon? There are other places. And the nice part is at the statewide.pulsephilly.org website, you can actually connect just by clicking on their logo, see what they're doing, or go on the next page to resources to actually see how you can build a pardon project. That's the nice part about coming a little bit late into it. People have gone before and really nailed it down. So what's the problem? The problem is not bad people. The problem is not people who have seen God and now need to be forgiven. The problem is that once you get the criminal record, you never escape. It follows you around day and night. You're always being asked to check the box, and everybody is checking because your record is available in Pennsylvania 24/7, 365. That's what the problem is. And so this is a list of occupations in Pennsylvania where the state licensing board uses and looks at criminal record histories in order to grant a license. I mean, who knew, right? All these different things. Cosmetologist. I didn't know what one was. I thought it was somebody who studied cosmos. I don't know, the comets. It's a hair braider. Now, you might want to know, why does a hair braider need a license? But worse is, why would a hair braider not be allowed to be a hair braider because of a criminal record in their past somewhere? Not a good moral character. That's why. So all of these things are keeping people from getting jobs. You look at this list and you say, oh my God, really? They can't get a job because of the criminal record? Yeah. And that's not the worst of it. The worst of it is, it's not just jobs. It's education, housing, loans, personal and for your job, professional licensing, voting. You can't serve as the custodian for your niece and nephew if your brother or sister's having a hard time. You can't go on your kid's trip in school or coach their t-ball team. This it totally excludes people from society. And it's terrible in Pennsylvania because we have one of the worst problems of criminal records, of incarceration, of parole and probation anywhere in the world. Not just in the United States. We're one of the top 3 or 5 in the United States, and the United States is one of the worst in the world. And look at those rates. Look at how many people in Pennsylvania have criminal records. 1 out of every 3. Now, that could only be arrests, and we are only talking about convictions. But the numbers of people and families that are suffering because of the records of things they did 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago is astonishing. It's hundreds of thousands. And as is very clear to everyone now, you and your family will stay in poverty if you have the criminal record. And the only way of getting out of poverty is getting rid of your criminal record. It is the biggest impact strategy that the United Way has discovered for how to push their efforts to get people to escape intergenerational poverty. All right, so what's the opportunity? I have a quote here from a 2020 report that came out from the Economy League that was titled "Pardons as an Economic Investment Strategy, Evaluating a Decade of Data in Pennsylvania." And they were looking from 2008 to 2018. And back in 2008, if you applied, it took you 5 years to actually get through. So it was really the economic data from 2013 to 2018, just 5 years. And this think tank found that $16.5 million came out across Pennsylvania, mostly to middle and lower income communities, just by the governor signing his signature. That's it. Didn't cost anything. Well, it's staff time, but that's it. And what's the downside? This committee, dealing with public safety and criminal justice, should know that the recidivism rate is virtually none. You always hear about, the risk, the public safety risk. And that's because people our age, my age, grew up with Michael Dukakis having to worry about Willie Horton. Remember Willie Horton, the guy who was pardoned? The black guy coming out from behind the wired fence with a chicken wire at the top and went out and raped and murdered some folks. That's what George Bush put on the airwaves right before the election. And that's how people still think of pardons. That's not this. These are people who have been on the outside, finished their sentences, 5, 10, 15 years, and now are looking for an even break. So what's the pathway? What is the pathway to clearing the criminal record? Well, as I explained, you have to go to a judge to get it expunged, really erased. And for felonies and misdemeanors, the judge can't do anything unless the governor pardons you first. And this is by the Constitution of Pennsylvania. And since the late 1800s, you can't go to the governor the way you can to a president, say, and just because I made a big contribution or know some people or, are white and affluent. No, you got to go something through the Board of Pardons. The Board of Pardons has 5 members, 2 elected officials and 3 citizens. The elected officials are the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, and then there's a victim representative, a medical doctor, and a corrections expert. The last 3 are appointed to 6-year terms by the governor with the consent of the Senate. And those 5 people decide, they're the screen for who gets to go to the governor. So here's the process. You get the application for the Board of Pardons. And on this one, you need to not only fill out the application, you have to get copies of court records, and that's going to be important later. Then when it goes into the board, they ask for input by the court and the district attorney in the county or counties where the person's convictions were. And this is why the district attorney is important. Because if you're trying to set one of these things up now and the DA is going to say, absolutely not, no way, never, that person may have a hard time of it. Now, the Board of Pardons is not bound by whatever the DA says. It just makes it a bit harder. So if you can get the encouragement or the support of the DA in advance, it's really helpful. It can shorten the process from 2.5 years to 1 year. After the application comes in and they get input by the court, the Department of Corrections actually has a parole officer going out and doing the investigation, and they look at whoever they want. They look at your employment records, they talk to your employer, they go to your bank, they go to your house, they go to the neighborhood, they check your references. It's the government. They do whatever they want. So the parole agent will then put together a report and send it into the Board of Pardons. And the 5 members of the Board of Pardons will then look at it, and they'll get together in a public session, usually by phone, called a merit review. And this is when they decide on the record in public who merits a public hearing. Because under our Constitution, you cannot get a referral to the governor unless there is a public hearing on it first. So they have to vote. 2 out of 5 people have to vote to recommend somebody for a hearing. Now, we're not talking about people in prison trying to get out. We're not talking about lifers or people sentenced to death, because they are much different. These are, again, for people on the outside seeking a pardon 2 votes to get to the hearing. And when they have the public hearing, the vote happens that same session, either that day or the next day. You only need 3 votes to get to the governor. It goes to the governor, and then the governor gets to decide. There are no rules about any of this. It's entirely discretionary, whatever they think. So what we're trying to do in order to get to the governor is just persuade 3 people. Now, I did say it usually takes 2.5 years. There are now 3 expedited tracks. One is if your crime involved marijuana or paraphernalia, you can get to a hearing within 1 year. Now, it can't involve sex or violence, but just possession, use, whatever, you get there in a year. If your crime is over 15 years ago and didn't involve sex or violence, you get to the board really fast. And if the district attorney recommends you. Another reason to be talking to the DA, because they're going to be asked anyway. So asking them early on whether or not they support somebody's candidacy gets that person to the top of a list, which right now is about 1,000 people a year, up from 300 just 3 years ago, but growing every year because of pardon projects and the understanding that this is the only way that we in Pennsylvania, where our middle name is mass incarceration, it's the only way we're going to free our society of all these weights. So what's the opportunity? The opportunity is the entire process is free. The application is online. You can't fill it in online, but you can download it. They'll get it online in a year or 2. It's written mostly in plain English, no longer written in pure bureaucrat. It's only 4 pages long, down from 9. It's really pretty simple to figure out what they want. Lawyers are not necessary. Most applicants going before the board do not have a lawyer. And even if they did, the lawyers are not allowed to talk. Most of the resources are now online. And one of the ones that I wanted to make sure you saw is we have a video library. You can learn all about filling out a pardon. You can hear from people who've gone through the process peer to peer. It's all online. More and more courts are now agreeing to provide the records that you have to attach in answer to an email request, and they're sending them out by PDF instead of charging people and making you come into the courthouse to get them. It's one of the advantages of the virus we've had. People don't want people in the courthouse, so they're being nicer and they're sending the documents out. And honestly, the court clerks really want to help. And now the board hearings, which used to be held in the Supreme Court room in Harrisburg only, are now being held online via Zoom, which is great not only for the applicant, but for everybody who's thinking about applying and everybody who is thinking about coaching, because now you get to see the way the judges think. In real time, it is the best live TV ever. It's reality TV. And here's the best news of all. And I really want to leave this on the screen so you can read it all. 87% of the people getting a hearing before the board, 87% are getting recommended. The governor is approving 98%, and he will sign his 2,000th pardon probably this month or next. And the courts, once the governor grants a pardon, the courts must erase. So the question is, how do we get our clients, our neighbors, to the Board of Pardons and persuade 3 of them that this person really deserves a second chance? What do? We work with people and help them write the best applications they can. We help them think about what kinds of supporting documents are out there. Letters where they got denied a job, or complimented them for doing things, or promotions, or their GED they got, or a certificate for something, or all the things they've done. How about if they volunteered in the community and get a letter of thanks from the place they volunteered? All of that matters because it shows this is a person who's contributing to our society. He deserves or she deserves a second chance. And then they have 2 essays they have to write. Now, we work in Philadelphia where the average person reads at a 3rd to 5th grade reading level. And these are government forms. And one of the questions is, the first one, so what were you doing at the time you got arrested and how did you come to be arrested? That can be a little hairy to answer. If you're doing a lot of bad stuff and only got convicted of 1, what am I doing? Am I, setting myself up to get arrested again? And what happens if you pled guilty, but you didn't do it? but you just didn't have the money to post bail and get out. How do you answer that question? And how far in detail do they want you to go? And do I start talking about how I was a child in a single parent household where the male was beating me up all the time and my mom was doing? Is that the answer? And the second essay is, so why do you think you deserve a pardon? Now this one's optional. It actually says at the top of the page, optional. And everyone who's ever watched TV, a crime show, knows that whatever you say can and will be used against you, right? So only an idiot would fill out an optional essay. The fact is, that's the most important page in the whole application. That's where people get to say who they are today, where they're going tomorrow, how they change from where they were before, how the board can be sure they're not going back that way, and what have they done to help their community. Unless you know what's behind the form, you don't know how to write up that essay, even if you could write beautiful essays by yourself. So what pardon coaches do is they tease out, they ask the person those questions first. Tell me about yourself. What's going on in your life? Where do you want to go? How can I help you get there? How can a pardon help you get there? Okay, let's write that up. And then you go back to, okay, so how'd you get arrested? But the emphasis is on them today and their future, not what they were arrested and convicted for. Who makes good pardon coaches? Anybody who's a good listener, who's got enthusiasm and patience. Empathy is really helpful, but someone who is willing to be maybe the first person ever helping the person who needs to apply. So now what are the next steps? Every county is different. Every area is different. Who in your community would be interested in doing this? Is there a need? Are there enough people with criminal records being held back that you could really help some people, or is it just a couple? So you don't need to make all the fuss. Is there enough interest by people to help? Who do you want to help? Is it rich people? Well, how poor do you have to be? So eligibility criteria are really pretty important. What kind of crimes are you going to help them get erased or pardoned? Murders? Well, not too many of these pardon projects go that far. But most of the crimes that are out there now, most of the convictions are drug related. And right now, after 10 years, the board is recommending 94% of those folks to the governor. So there's some easy ones there. How do we reach people with criminal records? You can't go into a room and say, okay, anyone with a criminal record here, raise your hand. People don't want to check that box and out themselves in public any more than they have to. So how do you get to them? And why should they believe you when none of them and none of you know anyone who's ever gotten a pardon? And they probably just know that it goes to rich white guys from the suburbs who know people and can afford a rich lawyer, which may be the federal system, but is certainly not Pennsylvania's system. Once we can reach the people who need the help, who are the people who can help? Yeah, we can always go to the Bar Association, but lawyers are not critical to this. They can be helpful like anybody else. How do we reach people who are willing to be taught how to be pardon coaches? We have to get understanding by the court because we got to get the court records out. So at least we have to go to the clerk. We have to let the DA know what's going on so that they don't get upset and say no to everybody. We explain to them what's going on. We ask them what kind of criteria they want to see. Not that we have to accept it, but just so we know what they're interested in. And believe it or not, most of the DAs, almost all of the DAs around the state have been really engaged in this. They have been founding members of the pardon projects. They are actively engaged in the process, and some of them are involved in the screening of candidates so that they can start writing their letters of recommendation right up front. It's remarkable. Okay, so now if you're starting this, where do people go for information? Website, all right? Who's got the website? Where does the email go? Most of these are pardon me Lebanon, pardon me Allegheny, pardon me Beaver, pardon me Erie, pardon me Washington @gmail.com. But who's reading the emails? So we have to be thinking ahead towards, okay, once we get this up and running and people are going and we have people asking for help and volunteers, who's putting them together? Who's answering the questions? Who's deciding if the person fits the eligibility criteria? Okay. So that's the how do you make it sustainable? If you're really going to if you're going to build something so there's there, How do you find somebody who's going to be the coordinator? It can be a retiree. It can be a staff person inside, I don't know, pretrial services. It can be a staffer in legal services. It can be a staffer here or there. It can be a pardon fellow, which are being set up around the state. There are so many different options. And again, it really depends on the county. What assets do you have? What resources are available? Who can step up to help? Who are the people who need to be in the room to be brainstorming these? Because the earlier you get people in, the more buy-in and ownership that there is, the faster it goes, and the quicker we can get this incredible opportunity out to people who really deserve it. And remember, it's not just for them and their families, which is incredibly important, but it's for the communities in which they live and work. Because more money to them mean more jobs, more things being purchased, higher standard of living for everybody. And that's what the secret of pardons is now, as we have come to understand it. So one thing I want you to know, the Board of Pardon now meets 3 times a year, 4 days over the session. The next one's coming up April 26th to the 29th. It is live, it's on TV. You tap in, you're there at 9 o'clock, and you watch until you're tired. I see someone taking a picture of this. I will make sure you all get this, the PowerPoint, so that you won't have to worry about this thing. And I have lots of additional information in the pages I'm not showing you, so you can read more about it. But that really is the end of what I wanted to talk with you about. This is, I think, an incredibly exciting time to be involved in this element of social and racial justice, because we all know the enforcement of the laws is not, we're not all in it all together. It's been unequal application of the law for a long time. But where this is going is everybody, every community has been afflicted by criminal records, by arrests, by convictions, largely because of drugs. And we can get out of this together because of community action. So with that, I'm going to end it. I'm going to stop the share, and I will be ready to do questions however you'd like to do it. Hope that was roughly about right.
Very good. No, that was perfect, Tobey. That was really great. So thank you so much. Highly informative and really useful. And now we're going to open it up for questions. I'll start. When you went, as long as no one else is jumping in here.
It looks like Susan's trying to. Susan, were you trying to ask a question? No, right. Sorry.
No, okay. Okay. Very good. Again, in terms of resources that we can, pursue on our own here as we investigate this, it was the slide right before number 2. You had that up on, you had it up on the screen, and it said, you had mentioned you can click on videos, you can click on, you mentioned a whole bunch of things you could click on for resources. And I was wondering where exactly you were pointing to, on which one, because there's a couple of websites, right? You have all
right, let me see if I can find it. Hold on for 1 second.
The plsephilly.org.
All right.
And then you have pardonmepa.org.
All right. So do you see this right?
So there's two websites. Okay.
Mike, can you see the website now that
yes.
All right. So this is PLSE, Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity, Philly, pulsephilly.org. This is our homepage.
Yep.
And the first thing is for the statewide pardon project, assuming this works. This you can read about. There's links to articles, examples, studies, and then down at the bottom, there are these logos that if you push, here's the Pardon Project of Beaver County. You can click on that, and it shows you what they're doing in Beaver County. So you can actually go through all these and see what counties you think might be similar, read about what they're doing, and get some examples. The other thing that's on here are resources, which is the next page here where it says it. This is for new pardon projects. So there are different categories: getting started, developing the project, outreach to communities that are suffering by criminal records, how you train pardon coaches, and how you make the project sustainable, And in all of these different categories, we've linked here examples from the pardon projects that have been set up around the state. So if you want to see eligibility criteria, right down here, there's one of Erie County and there's one of Berks County. They have acceptance and reject letters. We have the court prothonotaries policy on providing underlying records for free. So it's a variety of things where here's what's already happened. Some of it will work, some of it won't. I can help lead you through what the options are. I've been involved in most of the steering committees that have put these together, but there are examples. As to the rest of the website, there's information up here that's available. We tried to make this as client-friendly as possible. Because of COVID, we weren't able to do the face-to-face work. We weren't able to get out in the community. And so we were trying to make this as easy for people to follow as possible. But the one I highlighted in the slide deck was the video library. And the video library is, we tried to create this for Philadelphians, taking the subway from home to where they work or coming downtown. So these are 4 to 8 minute videos. They have 3 different types. General information over here on the left, peer-to-peer advice from people who've gone through the pardon process, and do it yourself, filling out the application. So if you would check on something like the advice, here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different videos with titles. Why is a pardon important? And the person here with who's speaking is the secretary of the Board of Pardons, or at least he was until December. But everybody in here, including the secretary, had been convicted of a crime and went through the pardon process. So this is their reflections on what did they learn and what would they like to share. And then down at the bottom, we actually have 9 videos by a lawyer who volunteers with Pulse a lot. And he goes through the application section by section,
Wow.
explaining what this is, explaining where you go to find out what your record is, explaining what things you are asking for from the court, explaining what this question means and how you should answer it, giving some of the tricks that we'd be teaching, talking about a rap sheet and what it comes from. Now, there is something like down here in the lower right-hand corner, video 8, other offenses you've been charged with. That's now no longer on the form. As of January 1st, they took out a whole page. So it really is much easier than even these videos are about. But that's the way we were trying to make sure that no matter who was involved in this, if it was an individual who doesn't have access to a pardon project, but somewhere else in the state, or people who are interested in starting a pardon project could get examples and see how they have been rolling out throughout the state.
That's enormously helpful. It looks like a really helpful bundle of information that we can pursue. Other questions? Thank you very much for that. Other questions?
Yes. I saw in the news that our DA has, or they have loosened some of the, I don't know, restrictions or histories on marijuana offenses. What does it look like for Lebanon County to pursue something like this with our DA? She would have to be involved, would she not?
Yes, and so the DA gets involved in the formal pardon process after the application's been filed, it's been accepted. The Board of Pardons sends a letter out to the chief judge saying, okay, this person's applied for a pardon and was convicted in your court. You know, we'd welcome any comments. And they send the same form letter out to the DA.
Okay.
The DA does not have to answer.
Okay.
The DA can answer with, a cut and paste. This is what we always do. Or if they've been involved and know about the pardon project and know the people that it's proposing, they can say, oh yeah, I've been working with the pardon project and this is a good person. I recommend this person get a pardon because they're doing good things.